I've just come back from Ukraine, in fact, just yesterday, after spending a month reporting from there. And just before we speak to anybody here, I'm going to be joined from Ukraine by the deputy mayor of Mariupol, Sergei Orlov. His southern city, you may have heard in the news, has been under almost constant heavy bombardment by Russian forces and has spent most of the last 10 days suffering a brutal siege. Deputy Mayor Sergei, thank you very much for coming back on the program. I spoke to you just a few days ago when I was in Lviv, and then you had not been able to speak to your family on the other side of the river. Have you managed to speak to them now?
Good evening. Unfortunately for me personally, the same situation. I cannot connect with my mother, father, and native brother for 12 days, and I just pray and hope that they are alive.
It must be terrible to go through that. Tell us about the situation in the city, because there have been some people who have been evacuated, haven't there, recently? How many?
I will start from military situation, from the war. So Ukrainian army defeat the city and it control internally our city. But Russian army attacks the city, and we have some even street battles. We received some information that one or two of important buildings were captured by Russian, and we will talk about it. We can talk about it a little later.
Okay.
And the most awful is constant airstrikes and air bombing. So we saw it during the war that Ukrainian army is ready to compete and to defeat against the Russian army. And they have braveness, they have character, they have power, they have weapon to defeat our lives on earth. But unfortunately, we do not have weapon against airstrikes, against attack from the air.
And Sergei, we'll be sorry to interrupt you, we'll be talking about the no-fly zone in a minute, but just very briefly, Sergei, you've got politicians here in the audience. What would you like them to do? Literally in 2 lines, what would you like the West to do, represented here by politicians?
We know that a lot of efforts are done and a lot of help is provided for Ukraine, and we are very thankful. As our military told, we need more help to protect our lives and the lives of our families. But as a deputy mayor, I have some question for which I do not have answer.
Okay.
Cannot find answers. For example, I do not want to answer to mother who is calling, and just in simple voice she is talking. I have a child on my arms and he does not have food. What should I do? He is dying. So we should find somehow together answer to this question, because the humanitarian situation is terrible.
Okay. Sergei, thank you very much indeed. We hope to answer some of those questions that you just raised. Can we just give a big hand to Sergei Orlov, please? Thank you. Sergei, thank you so much. I hope you get your family out safely. I hope you stay safe. And I hope that this nightmare will be over soon. Thank you so much. Good luck to you. Well, that leads us straight into our first topic of discussion tonight. Should we do more militarily to help people in cities like Mariupol and throughout the rest of the country? NATO has ruled out, again, a no-fly zone in the skies above Ukraine, fearing a direct confrontation with Russia could trigger World War III. Huge quantities of Western weapons and equipment are finding their way into the hands of Ukrainian troops. But there are many people who say that the West should be intervening far more directly to stand up to Vladimir Putin's aggression. So that's what we'll deal with right now. I want to start with you, Anton. You know Sergei Orlov, don't you? You work together, is that right?
Yeah, we worked together on a steel plant in Mariupol many months back before I moved here. Yeah.
And when you hear him in your city, you know, and he hasn't talked to his family for ages.
I haven't talked to my family either.
Yeah, and they're still there?
Yeah, I haven't heard from my sister and her husband and their friends with whom they're hiding.
When's the last time you heard from them?
10 days.
10 days ago?
Yep.
Because all the lines are cut, there's no way to get through.
First of all, lines are cut, and second, don't forget the cities with no power for like, 12 days now.
Right.
No power. They can't charge their phones. They may have network, no power.
So you are, you know, as directly involved in this as so many people, you know, in the audience, but also many Ukrainians who now live in the UK. what would you like us all to do more?
Militarily or in general?
Militarily.
I don't understand why you're still not engaged. Have you heard what they say on Russian TV? We were also laughing when they were saying, oh, we should bomb Ukraine and stuff like that, and we thought, oh, it's just stupid propaganda.
So
Look
you
what's
think
happening now.
enforce the no-fly zone?
Enforce the no-fly zone. We don't really understand why you don't want to engage militarily, but if you don't want to, then okay, but at least provide us defensive weapons, and this thing with MiG fighters is just a shame.
Yes, that was a very complicated issue which ended badly for many people. Richard Harrington, you represent the government here. What's your response to Anton and indeed to the mayor?
I do, Matt. Well, as far as my understanding is that the British government are helping and have helped for some time to provide armaments for the Ukrainian military, particularly anti-tank weapons and other things. I must
Thousands
say,
of them, but
yes,
what they want is war. They want a no-fly zone to be enforced.
So I was going to come on to that.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding is, and my area is refugees, which I'd much rather talk about. That's not to take away what you said, but I was introduced as an expert, and I can only be an expert on what I know. But my understanding is that if NATO get involved in a no-fly zone, that is basically declaring war against Russia, which NATO and the British government's position is they're not prepared to do. But in terms of arming the Ukrainian military, in terms of helping hugely, which I'm happy to come on to, maybe in another segment of the programme, Matt, on the humanitarian side.
Yeah, we're going to have a whole section about refugees.
I thought so.
But we're also in the middle of a war, and they want to win that war, and they're asking us all the time, I got that question constantly, why aren't you doing more? Emily Thornberry, where do you stand on the no-fly zone?
I think it's so difficult when you hear these terrible stories and you see the pictures and you listen to such brave people to think, is there not more that we can do? Yeah. And should we not be involved? And particularly when there's bombing, can't we stop it? And I think that what we have to do, though, is to be careful about this. And essentially, when people say there's a no-fly zone, it needs to be understood what it is that's being asked for. It means essentially you have to enforce it, which means that if there is a Russian jet flying, then we have to be committed to shooting down a Russian jet. We also presumably need to be committed to bombing airfields so that the Russian military, the jets don't leave the land. So we're bombing Russia. Presumably we would
get... So it's a declaration of war against Russia?
It's an escalation very, very quickly. And in the end, I think, we will end up with more people being killed if we end up with a third world war than if we continue with the strongest sanctions the world has seen, and having that effective action and the huge bravery of the Ukrainians, who we do arm and we have been training, and we give all assistance to that we can.
Okay, let me ask the audience, actually. I mean, Emily Thornberry and Richard Harrington just said it very clearly. If we enforce a no-fly zone, if we have to shoot down Russian jets to protect Ukrainian civilians, we are basically asking for a war with Russia. Who here is prepared to take that risk? Show of hands. That's not that many people. I would say that's a third of the audience. Can I ask you why you're prepared to take that risk? Lady with the glasses and the blue sweater.
I mean, I'm no expert, but my very strong feeling is we're already in that war, and I don't personally understand how this sophisticated line appears to be drawn between what is defensive weapons, what are aggressive weapons, and how the rules all seem to apply. And I also believe that Putin is going to go on and on and on, and we may well get into that war anyway.
And he already said that actually the West already declared a war by imposing sanctions.
Yes, Putin has said that.
He has said this, and he can, he can...
But there's a difference between what he says and what will actually happen between our troops and his troops. Let me just turn to Ruslan. Ruslan, thank you very much. You've been here for 20 years, but you've got family, 22 years, but you've got family stuck on the border, right?
Yes, that's right.
So when you hear Sergei Orlov saying, please enforce a no-fly zone, and you hear the Minister of the Government and member of the opposition saying, we can't do it because it's a declaration of war, and two-thirds of the audience agreeing with them, what's your response?
Well, I do agree with the lady there. We're actually effectively in war already. And if you listen to the Russian propaganda, and there's a very prominent Russian journalist who was on the air in a TV like we are today, saying openly, if you think Ukraine is a temporary situation or the middle stop, think again. Has been said openly, and it's not...
So treat him like Adolf Hitler in 1939. You know, he will not stop at the Sudeten and he will carry on.
Pretty much that. So I think sooner rather than later, Britain will be involved in the war.
Okay.
May I say something?
Yeah, of course, my dear. I was going to come to you soon, please.
I also feel that one of the things we're doing here is talking about a no-fly zone as if it's some concrete thing. There are various ways we could do parts of a no-fly zone, a fly zone over western Ukraine. We can figure things out. We can land.
Be nuanced.
Yes, and so we don't have to talk about it as a no or a yes. And also, we promise and teach, I'm an educator, we teach our students that we will not sit back and repeat a Holocaust, that a Holocaust and genocide will never happen again. We are sitting at home watching a genocide of the Ukrainian people. So how is that okay?
Okay, all right. Ruth Damon, you actually you understand the military procedure more than most of us here. How dangerous would a no-fly zone be, and what new territory would it bring us into?
I think it would bring us into completely new territory, and I think, unfortunately, it's extremely dangerous. I do want to talk at some stage, maybe not right now, about the issue of additional weapons supplies to Ukraine, which I think is essential. But a no-fly zone risks nuclear war, and that it's as simple as, yes, it does. It's not an inevitable outcome of a no-fly zone, but there's
on a scale of 1 to 10, the 10 being the riskiest and 1 the least risky. I mean, seriously.
I honestly can't say, but I mean, even if it were 1, are we willing to risk 10% chance of a nuclear war? There's a reason why Russia, despite all its aggressive actions towards a lot of its neighbours, has never launched military action against a NATO state, including the Baltic states, which were previously part of the Soviet Union.
So we're asking for trouble
that's why
that
we're
doesn't
asking
necessarily
for
come our way.
Precisely. And that doesn't mean that we can't do more than we're doing now, but the risks are simply too high. A no-fly zone is dangerous, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Too dangerous.
I think, Ruth, it's also it's how things can escalate really quickly and get out of control.
Okay, well, let's put that question to the audience then. I'll get you in a minute. I mean, you heard it there very bluntly. Who here is prepared to risk nuclear war for the sake of protecting Ukrainians? Hands up, please. Okay. So the number of hands has gone down a little bit, if I put the question like that. But we do have to think of the worst-case scenario here, don't we? Right? Yes?
But of course, I mean, and that's the responsibility of NATO, right? Because NATO leaders are obliged to think of what the consequences will be for their own citizens.
Okay, so is it possible, Richard?
No, I was just saying that in the end, we know Putin has to be stopped. And NATO's policy is if there is any attack on a NATO country, that means that Russia is at war with the whole of NATO. The question is, how can Putin be stopped? Is the way to stop Putin us getting involved in a no-fly zone and attacking, effectively declaring war now on Russia, or they declare war on us? But the fact is the matter, Putin is a dictator, he is a czar. My family were kicked out of Russia by czars in 1906, and I don't think much has changed.
I think it's also a question of, will the current strategy work? Because if the current strategy will work, then that's the thing to do. We have never seen sanctions like this. The world is largely united against Russia. Russia is increasingly isolated. He's arrested his security chiefs. He's lost 3 of his generals. The war is not going his way. And increasingly, it isn't just sanctions where government has said we will sanction. Companies are unilaterally saying we're not trading with Russia anymore. And I think that could have an effect.
I want to bring in, just 1 second, I just want to bring in Sophie. Where's Sophie? Sophie, there you are. So sorry. Sophie, you have Russian family, right? You're of Russian descent. So this must be particularly difficult for you at the moment.
Yes. And Ukrainian family, of course,
right,
as well.
You've got so this must be very, very hard, because as someone said this morning on the radio, I think it was President Zelensky, this is a fratricidal war. He's pitting Russians against Ukrainians and vice versa.
Yes.
So how far would you be prepared to take this militarily?
As I said, I had family in Chernihiv who fled under Russian bombs because there are no safe corridors. Of course, I can't close the sky on Trafalgar Square, but I agree with the experts. I know Putin, and it's actually higher chance than 10%. He will nuke Ukraine because he knows there will not be air retaliation.
Does he care about occupying a country that's got buildings left in it, or does he just want to flatten it?
I think he will flatten it. That's why I think the most important thing is get the people out. We need safe humanitarian corridors. We need to get the people out because we're all hostages. Russians are hostages now as they sign petitions to ban SWIFT. My father is in Russia. He's a pensioner who's got cancer.
Is he in favour of the war or against the war?
He's against the war, but I can't support him. And it is like signing a death sentence for so many Russians who will run out of money, who will run out of medication. So we're all hostages of Putin.
It's difficult to know because there are no free opinion polls in Russia. But how many Russians do you think support this war?
I think initially there was a shock, and I had so many relatives from Russia write private messages to me saying how sorry they are because I was basically ousted. I was told in 2005, pack your bags and go to London, when I was saying we need to stop Putin then. So lots of messages saying they're sorry. They were shocked. But I think the initial shock has turned, and they are turning on back their televisions, which I've asked them not to do. And now they are listening.
Well, they might be lucky to get a newsreader or the producer with a sign. Okay.
Yes, please, more of those. I know this lady will probably end up in jail, but I think right now it is a higher percentage. They do believe it's a military operation, but hopefully things will change.
Okay. Sophie, thanks. Alenka, I just want to turn to you in this section, finally. This is really hard, isn't it? Because whatever we do, there are just bad outcomes. So what's the best possible solution in terms of what we should be doing in the West to prevent this from going completely bad?
I mean, I already said that I don't think we should be talking about the no-fly zone as if it's definitely defined. I think we can do more militarily. I think we can do more in terms of sanctions. The third largest Russian bank, Gazprom Bank, hasn't been sanctioned. So there is a lot more. We're taking these small steps and small sanctions while thousands, millions of people are suffering. Putin crossed the borders of a sovereign state in 2014. We did nothing. Nothing at all. That's when we should have had sanctions and then we wouldn't be in this situation. I'd like to add one more thing. One of the things that bothers me here is that Putin keeps bullying us and we think it's okay. Putin says, you know, I'm going to bomb hospitals now. And we look at it and we say, oh, it's a war crime. Eventually, we will put him on trial. But we still don't step in.
Mind you, the sanctions imposed by the West, which obviously haven't swayed his mind, but they were much tougher than anything he expected, because I think he thought he could go to war briefly in Ukraine, it would be a quick victory for him, and it would be over, and it hasn't been.
I would say, I'd like to say one more thing.
Yeah, quickly.
Because it would be nice if people in the UK, in the West, got to know Ukraine and didn't label all of Eastern Europe as Russia and got to know the different peoples there, then it wouldn't be a surprise that Ukrainians stand up for their own country.
Nearly 3 million Ukrainians have now fled the fighting, causing a humanitarian crisis in Europe on a scale not seen since World War II. Most have poured over the border into neighbouring countries like Poland, Hungary, Slovakia, Moldova, who are feeling the strain of such an overwhelming influx. The UK government has been criticised for its response to the crisis. Today it launched its Homes for Ukraine scheme, in which households here will get £350 a month if they volunteer to host refugees. Okay, let me start with you, Richard Harrington. You are the Minister for Refugees, newly appointed to this job. It's a new job. What is the idea behind having people welcoming refugees from Ukraine into their homes?
Well, the idea is this is going to be one of the biggest movements of refugees to this country that we've ever experienced. In order to do that, we need offers of accommodation from individuals and organisations. And by the way, it's not just accommodation, it's help with all of the things that refugees need. We are mobilising through this Homes for Ukraine scheme for the first time in history individual people. We have, I think today, the latest figure I heard was well over 100,000, in fact more than 100,000 people who registered, and we have spent, I've only been in the job for 3 days, Matt. That's not an excuse, but in that time, we've shortened the bureaucratic procedure, all this stuff about queuing at visa centres and everything like that.
How many people have registered so far?
More than 130,000.
Right, and how many people have actually been, you know, sent to these homes or arrived in these homes?
Well, we only launched the scheme
so no
today,
one yet,
but I'm expecting by a week today, I'm expecting tens of thousands of people.
Okay, right, let's talk to Julia. Julia, you have experience of this. Do you think they're doing enough? Is that a good idea that we just heard about?
Do you mean the idea specifically of
Yes.
housing? And well, I mean, it's definitely innovative. It's quite an ask for people with kind of serious traumas to come and live in your own personal space. And there is this insecurity because at the end of the allotted time, I think you have to house them for 6 months. Where do they...
Is that right, 6 months?
We're asking people for a minimum of 6 months.
Minimum of 6 months. And, you know, when you get to the end of that, then what happens to the Ukrainians if things haven't gone well with the living arrangements? Because it is difficult to live with someone. We all know that.
Yeah. Have you taken that into account?
We absolutely have. And the point, I'm sorry, I couldn't remember your name. Julia, the point Julia made is absolutely right. But this is emergency. This is getting people moving into this country. And all of the things, what she mentioned about very vulnerable people, we are also, apart from, believe me, this isn't about money, but we're funding local authorities to provide these wraparound services for vulnerable other education, health and all of the other things that they need.
What happens if it doesn't work? If after 3 months you don't like the people who've come to stay with you?
Well, then it is our responsibility, and we have local authorities who will be paid to step up to the plate. But this is, in my previous, I came out of retirement to do this job. When I started, in fact, when Emily and I first met each other, my responsibility was the Syrian resettlement programme. And in that case, we were able to house people by providing the services for the most vulnerable people that we could find in Syria. So this is a big programme, and it's not limited in numbers. It's not capped.
Emily Thornberry, I can't tell whether you're agreeing with him or not. Where do you stand on this?
So I think my starting point is that I'm really pleased that you're in the job.
Thank you.
Because you've got an awful lot to do. And to be honest, the plan isn't really fully made at all yet. And also you have to deal with the Home Office, which, again, you can't say this, but I know this is likely to be what you think. It is not exactly the best department, the best government department when it comes to delivery of services. And you have to be, and we've seen it. We've seen the chaos until now. So now we've got a scheme which, I mean, the British public have reacted in the way that we would all expect the British public to.
So what's wrong with
generosity. Well, what's wrong with it is we've got all these people coming forward to take people, but we don't have a scheme for how we're going to get them into people's homes. So if you know a Ukrainian, or if you're related to a Ukrainian, then it's quite likely that that can be sorted out. But if you don't, if you just put yourself forward, how is it organised that you get... So the forms are going up online on Friday.
Correct.
But we don't know... Like, how do you match them? Is it going to be down to the Home Office to do this? Is it going to be some private scheme? How is it going to be... And like, none of these questions are answered as yet. And, you know, so I think that it sounds fine. But, you know, first of all, it's such a shame that we've been dragging our feet until now. Yeah. And now we have an eye-catching scheme, but we haven't really got the details to show that it makes sense. And you'll forgive us for being a bit cynical, given what the Home Office can be like.
OK. Let's, Nelly Shevchenko, I want to ask you, in a second, just want to ask you, you're a lawyer, you deal with these issues. Are you convinced by what you're hearing from the government? And is it a workable system?
I guess the problem here, first of all, you mentioned that it's an emergency. The response from the Home Office was, it's been, what, 2.5 weeks? We have not had the scheme going on. The people cannot come to the UK without a visa. So the answer, probably mainly to all of these problems, and I can tell you a myriad of problems with the Home Office in terms of processing of the visas, how it's happening. If you just do the visa waiver, then you can bring actually Ukrainians to the UK. UK is the only country in Europe that has not waived the visas for Ukrainians.
OK, let Richard Harris now ask. Why haven't you waited?
I'll wait for the clapping to finish.
OK.
This lady is correct in what she says, but I'll explain how we're going to deal with that. From tomorrow, our new system, which we have worked very hard on in the 3 days I've been in the job, will be that people will fill in a form online, And by the way,
is it still 50 pages?
The form is not coming up until Friday.
Please let me explain.
Give him a
chance to explain.
Okay,
And
right.
by the way, Emily, I've worked with Emily before. She's making very constructive and positive points.
Let's hear it
We're
from
not
you.
playing politics here.
All right.
So people will download their passport. I'll come on to non-passport holders in a minute. They will then be some security checks, which will be done in the Home Office. At the moment, that will be 24 hours. I believe that will come down to less. They will be sent back a right to travel to this country. They will not have to queue up in visa centres or anything like that. When they come to this country, they'll be met at the airport by Border Force agents, and I'm hoping to have separate lines and people that speak Ukrainian and everything like that.
You've got the personnel for that? Have you started recruiting
We're gearing
people?
up, we're recruiting all over the place.
Is the form in English and in Ukrainian?
The form on Friday will be in English by very quickly. It will be in
You have to have it in Ukrainian.
Will it,
Of course it will.
the current form is 50 pages. Will
Yeah.
it be shorter than
It
that?
will be much shorter than that, Emily. I spent until midnight last night going through the form and seeing what could be pulled down. And that will take a little bit longer than Friday. But if I could just finish this lady's very valid point. Therefore, we can use the visa centres for people that don't have Ukrainian passports, that have difficult paperwork, or they're really vulnerable. And they've been hugely scaled up. So the point she made is correct, but I'm trying to deal with it, and I will deal with it.
Okay, there we go. We'll take your word for it. We'll be watching very closely.
Or I'll be back.
I want to just move to Faoud Mohammed. You came here from Somalia, sorry, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
When you hear this outpouring of generosity from tens of thousands of Brits who want to accommodate Ukrainian refugees, did you get that kind of treatment when you came here?
I was very grateful to the help I had under the Geneva Convention. All refugees, doesn't matter what color, what faith, gender, have to get all the same treatment. And I like to see this is a big crisis, not similar to anything we've seen since the Second World War.
But do you wish that someone at the time, 20 years ago, had said, you can come and stay with us in return for 350 quid
Up to
a
some
month from the
extent,
government?
yes. Yeah.
And why do you think there's a difference in the way that we're treating this refugee crisis?
Well, the starting point is we shouldn't treat our refugees differently.
Right.
We heard earlier somebody saying we are treating these refugees differently because they look like us.
Mm-hmm.
But the Geneva Convention says that doesn't matter what color you have, what religion, we should treat all refugees the same. And certainly we at Ashley Community Housing, I work with an organisation that welcomes refugees into UK.
Yeah.
All refugees are people. We should just treat them like people. Doesn't matter what religion they have.
So, Emily Thornberry, your party was in power when Faoud came over. Should we have opened our homes? Should your government then have said to the British public, please open your homes to people like Faoud?
I think there was a difference because there's a difference between settlement and a temporary patch. I think that we're all
sounding like a lawyer now.
No. No, I'm not. I'm talking like a person. So sometimes when if you're leaving a war zone and you're hoping that you're only going to be gone for a couple of months and you'll be able to go home again, then what you need to put on the ground then is different to, for example, the people coming from Hong Kong, who are going to be coming from Hong Kong and are likely to be settling here, or the people from Afghanistan who need to settle here because there's no chance of them going home again, at least not in the near future. So what we've always needed is we've needed to have a different scheme depending on what the crisis is. But what's important is that we did have a scheme and we had one ready to go, and we obviously didn't have that, and it's been a national embarrassment that it's taken so long.
All right. I just want to hear from anyone in the audience, why do you think we're treating people, Ukrainian refugees, differently to others before? Anyone got an idea? Yes, the lady in the red.
I think it's pretty apparent. It's to do with colour. It's plain as simple as that. You spoke about we'll treat everybody equal. You're just going to do a new form and a new line for Ukrainians. And, my heart goes out to Ukrainians. I volunteer for a refugee charity. When we go on Facebook and we ask people for charity, we have to say it's for vulnerable people. If we say Syrians, Afghanis, we don't get those donations.
Okay.
And that's the reality. And we're just not recognising that. When we see the media relate to civilised people, blonde hair, blue-eyed, it's disgraceful. Absolutely disgraceful. People don't mind taking Russian money, do they? Many
Richard,
people on this panel have.
Not me. Not me.
Well, I think some of you have...
Richard, why don't you respond to that?
I really don't care what colour, eyes or hair or anything everybody has, but I would make...
Was there a difference between how you treated Syrians in 2015 and how you've treated Ukrainians now?
I would respectfully disagree with that, because you mentioned, for example, having a separate lane at immigration. Well, that's exactly what we did for the Syrians. They were met, they had people in welcome centres, which we'll be setting up again, for people that, to speak the language and help them with helping vulnerability and all things like that. So I accept that. But what I can't accept...
that is not the case.
I spent my time, for quite some time, setting up the Syrian programme. And I can assure you there is no difference. The only difference...
But why didn't we ask people to accommodate Syrians when that happened?
Because it was a small number of volume of people, and we were able to do the housing through the local authorities.
Okay. All right.
But we haven't got that volume.
Do we question Syrians? Do we say to Ukrainians, go to your nearest country?
Okay.
Do we say that to them? No, we don't.
No,
we don't question neither. So there's lots of hypocrisy.
Let's get a response to gentleman in the back here with the glasses in the middle. Yes, the goatee. Quickly.
I find it quite shocking that we're looking back when we've got a Ukrainian crisis right in front of us at the very minute. The reason we're looking back is because our response has been so decisive and actually so positive that we're wondering why we weren't always this good. But isn't it just a good example of what you should be doing? Can't we look forward now?
Fair enough. Okay, before we end this section, I want a show of hands. So the first question is, how many of you are prepared to accommodate a Ukrainian refugee today? Okay. How many of you would have been prepared to accommodate a Syrian refugee, when was it, 5 years ago? Okay, that's actually a slightly smaller number, but almost the same. Even before this war started, people here in the UK were facing a historic cost of living crisis. The conflict has pushed the price of oil and gas through the roof, meaning that energy bills, already staggeringly high, look set to skyrocket even further. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, is coming under pressure to ease the burden on families when he makes his spring statement next week. So that's what we're going to talk about. It's not just the cost of living crisis, but also the cost of sanctions and how we pay for that. Because although we all love to see, an oligarch super yacht being confiscated, or, people moving into oligarchs' homes in London, perhaps for a bit, the point is that these economic sanctions will have an enormous cost on us, won't they? So, Charles, you work for council here in the area. You deal with this cost of living stuff all the time. Tell us about the reality of it.
The fact is that local authorities are overwhelmed with people looking for food items. So we are referring more people to food banks. We are receiving calls about energy bills. The local authorities have set aside funds called hardship payment funds, discretionary, to help people who cannot afford to meet their energy bills, and also to provide them with food. So food banks...
It's already tough, and it's going to get tougher. So let's say, the price of a chicken apparently will increase by 15% because Ukraine and Russia are huge exporters of chicken. They're not being exported at the moment for all the obvious reasons. If a chicken is 15% more expensive, does it become unaffordable for the kind of people that you're speaking to?
Absolutely. In fact, not just that. Everything, the shopping basket has gone up in general. So it's not just the food item, everything. We are affected indirectly, but the sanction is also already biting now.
Right. Who here, I just want another show of hands, who's worried about their cost of living going up as a result of this crisis and the sanctions that we've imposed? Let's see. Okay, that's not that many. Does that mean you're not worried about it because you're prepared to take the pain, or just because you're not worried about it? Lady in the blue sweater.
Yes, I was just thinking that actually we can look at it as short-term pain for long-term gain. Yeah. But, things are already short. Things are already very, very expensive. But I think if we were to stick it out, so to speak, and bear the short-term pain, and with the hope that things will get better in the long run.
Okay. Who here thinks the government should do more in order to alleviate this crisis caused by sanctions? Lady with the dark hair.
Thanks.
Second row. What do you think? Why?
I think that we're seeing this in other countries, especially related to the energy crisis. the government in France have already capped their energy. Why are our government not stepping in to cap ours?
Over to you.
I thought you would ask me that, Matt.
There's a surprise.
Yes, well, as the lady correctly says, I mean, energy prices have gone up dramatically. They were going up dramatically actually before this. And it's part of, the reality is higher prices are part of the price that we are all going to have to sacrifice for this.
But should government be more honest and open about it? Because the debate I'm not hearing from government is we have to impose these sanctions, it's going to cost us more.
I agree. It will cost us more. You asked me straight, but I will just try and answer this lady's question about it's basically helping the most vulnerable by capping energy, as Charles explained in his first comments about people needing more food banks and everything like that. The Chancellor, in his statement a few weeks ago, brought in some measures to do with council tax and other things, and I'm sure he's very. I've no party to what's in the budget or anything like that. But I'm sure he's very conscious in ways the government can help the most vulnerable. But we are stuck with it.
OK. Emily Thornberry, this couldn't have come at a worse time, this crisis.
No,
after COVID,
I agree.
After everything else.
I agree. And I'm concerned about the Chancellor because I don't think he ever answers these questions in a straightforward way. He seems to go for the most convoluted, way around, or he just doesn't seem to get it. So we already had, energy prices going up. We said, look, you charge VAT on energy, so you're making a lot of money because all the prices have gone up, so let's have a cap on VAT, and then you can hand out that money around to people. You can also have a windfall charge on those who are getting the energy out of the ground and make sure that those profits are shared out as a whack. And what he did was he decided that he was going to lower the council tax, but he was going to force a loan on everybody so that their energy prices were... But it was based on the idea that, of course, sometime in the future, near future, energy prices would go down again. At that stage, we were paying off the loan, but instead, the prices continue to go up, and we're all going to have to be paying off this loan at the same time. So why doesn't he just take the straightforward way of dealing with it? Don't put up national insurance at a time when people are...
But we're not... I don't want to get into the rest of the government's economic policies.
I'm just saying, that there's... I just feel that we say to them, you don't have a plan, here you are, here's a Labour plan, all right. We give this to you free, and they still don't use it.
Emily, sorry, gentleman with the glasses. It's your turn.
Yeah, I just wonder, we're talking about, making a sacrifice on our end, and my take on it is really simple. If I'm convinced that it works, then... Sure, it's easy enough for me. Your question earlier was, do we, can I afford to take it? And I can. So I'm not concerned about it. I know that I'll be okay personally.
Right.
I am concerned for a lot of other people in the country. But is it worth it? Do we know that it works? Because is it going to take bullets out of Russian guns?
Okay. Yes. I want to ask Ruth a question. Ruth.
Yes.
It's not just sanctions. It's also spending on the military. We've just seen that Germany's increased its military budget exponentially. This has to be done, does it not, if we want to shore ourselves up against what might happen in the future with Russia?
Yes, it absolutely has to be done. And in answer to your question, yes, of course. The Russian armed forces are not doing well in this conflict. Wars are extremely expensive, and the Russian economy is in desperate trouble now. Yeah. And that, of course, is going to affect the ability of the Russian government to continue to fight. So from that point of view, I think sanctions are important. I also think that we need to be clear of, the government needs to be clearer, that there is a cost to all of us to be paid through those sanctions, but that this is necessary because the alternative is going to be much worse, not just for us economically, but in security terms.
I just want to put a couple of questions to the audience. Who here is prepared to, I don't know, turn down their thermometer to 19 degrees or 18 degrees in order to save money on energy bills and also do their bit? Okay. Fine. And then finally, slightly more frivolous, who here is going to give up Russian vodka? Okay. Who's going to drink Ukrainian vodka?
I am, already.
We're not sponsored by anyone, by the way. I'm just asking.
Online.
Okay.
Very good.
No, I'm sorry, we've got to go to the next section. The ramifications of this war are being felt all around the world. The invasion has triggered a whole range of thoughts and opinions on what to do in response, many of which we've heard from tonight. But words will not help Ukrainians trapped in their besieged cities or the millions of refugees looking for a new home. So I just want to spend the short time that we have left on this program discussing what are the most realistic and immediate solutions to this terrible conflict. What more do people think we ought to be doing right now? Alenka.
We should do everything more. I think, first of all, we should realize that this is our war. These are our values, democracy, freedom, that Ukrainians are protecting for us. This is what they embraced, what they chose. They chose to look to Europe, and we cannot abandon them. And we shouldn't make this into a racial issue about immigration. We should all stick together in this time of crisis.
Okay. Ruth, that was a very impassioned plea there from Alenka. But when it comes to the military side of things, there are some very, very hard questions we have to ask ourselves. Yes. What should we do more? What can we do more that will help the Ukrainians win this terrible war without getting us into World War III?
I mean, I don't think that increasing military aid is going to necessarily take us into World War III, and I think at this point we should be providing the Ukrainian government with all the military assistance that it needs, short of us actually becoming directly involved in the war. So certainly, I mean, increased surface-to-air missiles, if that's what the Ukrainian government wants, anti-tank weapons, if that's what they want. These are the necessary tools. Yes, absolutely.
Let me talk to Nikolai Petrov. You understand Russia. You maybe have an insight into the mind of Putin that most people don't. What does he listen to? What will make him stop this war? Is it just outright victory in his book or anything else?
I think it's hard to penetrate into his mind, but what I see, there are two general options. One is for the West to participate actively in this war, and Ukraine, in my view, did already win this war in moral sense, but it cannot win militarily against Russia. So either the West should...
They say the opposite. I mean, they say they can still win. Is that just bravado? I mean, are they trying to be optimistic for their own sakes?
Well, they are heroes, but the cost is huge. The country is devastated, and we do see 3 million refugees, and who knows how many will follow. So in my view, there are two general ways, either to participate, for the West to participate in this war, or to make a peace by all means in order to stop the war in Ukraine.
Richard Harrington, what happens if, Zelensky, the president, is right? If we don't get involved, we don't enforce the no-fly zone, we're not treating this as our war, and suddenly he's gone to Poland, or he's gone to Romania.
If he declares war against a NATO country, then that is war with every single NATO country. But what we can do, Matt, when you asked that question, one, keep the squeeze on Putin from sanctions and everything we can do. Two, hugely increase our humanitarian aid, and we're the top country at this. Three, make our refugees programs work in the volume that we need to provide some alleviation to the misery of the people who are fleeing Ukraine.
I think our country being the top on humanitarian aid, I think the Poles and maybe the Germans would probably beg to differ.
I'm talking monetary terms.
Okay, but let's not turn this into that kind of competition. Emily, very briefly, from you, what should we be doing more?
I mean, I think on top of what Richard is saying, and I've agreed with a lot of what he said, I think that we must not underestimate these new generation of sanctions that do target individuals, and they target the individuals around Putin. And remember, they have Putin's gold in their pockets. He keeps his money elsewhere, and we are freezing there. And it's the gang around him, and
but
that
maybe
will
he doesn't
have.
care. Maybe he doesn't care.
Oh, I think he cares, and I think his friends
so sure.
care. And I think that there's a mixture of that plus the general sanctions.
All right.
But we must remain strong. We must remain united.
Okay, lady with the wonderful necklace.
Sorry, why is it now that we are squeezing him? He's been this kind of errand boy for a long time, and yet now we choose to turn around and say naughty, naughty. Actually, he should have been put in time out a long time ago.
No, I agree with you. And when he attacked Crimea, he should have done it then.
Yeah, just the same point. Peskov, his press secretary, was only sanctioned today, 20 days into the war.
All right,
Come on.
A man with a hat, quickly.
Whatever we do, we need to act quickly. The most important is enforce air defense in Ukraine, so cities and nuclear sites are not bombed. The longer we delay, the higher cost for Britons will be.
All right, last one there at the end.
This is about precedent. This is about the values of democracy at stake. We don't have to debate about any other issues here. This is two things. This is for the Ukrainian people. This is for mothers, fathers, grandparents and more. This is people. This is humanity. Let's make the right decision.
on that note, I'm going to have to end this discussion. That's all we have time for this evening. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's been a fascinating evening of debate and discussion. Thank you to all of you for watching. Thanks to our guests. Thanks to everyone. Thank you for watching this special edition of Channel 4 News. Good evening.